All right. Well, everyone, thank you for joining this morning for our Transformer Analytics overview. This is Matt Hiley from Tantalus Systems, and I really thank you all for signing in today and participating on what we think is a pretty important and interesting topic to run over with you. I am recording the webinar, and I will share this with everyone after we get done. You all are in mute at this point, so just know that if you have any questions right now, please submit through the chat button, which is at the bottom of the screen here. I'll be moderating that and collecting those, and as appropriate during the presentation, make sure they are asked and we get them over to our panelists. Oh, Andrew, would you go to the next slide, please? Just a quick legal notice and disclaimer from our side. This is an intended presentation for you all that are on the conversation this morning for your eyes only. Today's agenda, just quickly, I'll provide introductions to the panelists and team that are presenting today. We'll go through the Transformer Analytics overview from a solution perspective. And then we've got two kind utility participants on the line that will run through their efforts and learnings around their deployment of Transformer Analytics. And at the end, we'll have some time for questions and answers. I'll open up the presentation for questions at that point, and we can talk about potential next steps going forward. Again, just so you know, during the session, if you do have a question, please just submit it in chat, which is a button. You all are probably familiar with Zoom down at the bottom of the screen in chat, and I'll get to and address those throughout as appropriate, where we have a break or a time where we can get to them. Next slide, please, Andrew. Thank you. Just so we have a face with a name and who's online today. As we go across the screen, left side is Andrew Mitchell, who's the Director of Utility Solutions here at Tantalus, and has been deeply involved with the Transformer Analytics solution from the start of our effort around this. He's going to take us through the solution itself. Sarah Clark from Estes Park and Adam Edwards, who I don't have a picture of, sorry, Adam, are on from Estes Park, and they're going to take us through their deployment, their scenarios, use cases, and what they've learned and are seeing from Transformer Analytics at Estes Park. On the right side is Rachel Schur. Rachel is from La Plata Electric Association. Sorry, did I say left? That's right. That's right this morning. Sorry. And she's going to take us through similarly what they've seen and learned at La Plata Electric Association with their deployment of the Transformer Analytics solution. So in addition to Tantalus, we've got, we think, a great overview from utilities as to how they have deployed and are learning from the Transformer Analytics solution. So to Sarah, Adam, and Rachel, thank you for joining this morning and being willing to participate and talk about what you've learned and accomplished with your deployment. Next slide, please. Just before we get actually off to the nitty-gritty of what's going on here, I wanted to just make sure and run over for you all on the line what Tantalus is thinking about relative to Transformer Analytics and how the impetus behind the development of our solution came about and what we're looking to do. Of course, in today's world, there's some degree of pressure around both the grid and the transformers that are deployed out there, whether it's extreme weather, supply chain issues, safety issues, the extension of the life cycle of product. We want to make sure we're helping you to address those. And so our solution is really designed, we look at it from 4 different angles. One is to prevent. Can we help with addressing and mitigating emergent issues, outages, explosions, real activity that needs to happen based upon some type of issue that needs to be addressed imminently? Can we help to prioritize what you're seeing on your grid and how you're using transformers today and going forward, which need attention, which may need to be moved? Are we wasting capability or capacity in addressing those issues? Preserving what's out there. So again, making sure that we aren't overloading, that we aren't running into issues with life cycle when we don't need to be, especially considering supply chain issues that are in place today. What we're hearing, and you all are probably more familiar than I am, but depending upon the model itself, we're looking at a year longer in terms of lead times in acquiring transformers. And then with that in mind, planning ahead. So, how can we help you all address the issues that I just mentioned and make sure that going forward, we're proactive in both enabling what's out there today and accounting for what we might see happening in the future. And Transformer Analytics was built around this. From a Tantalus perspective, I'm not going to go into Tantalus very much today. I hope most of you know who we are. Tantalus has been in the market for 30 plus years from a consulting and solution provider perspective and offering AMI solutions to electric cooperatives and public power for about the past 15 years or so. Any questions you all have about our alternative or additional solutions beyond Transformer Analytics, please be free. You're free to contact me or Andrew or any other of our team to discuss those. We've got our contact information at the end of this presentation. But with that in mind, we're gonna move on and dive right into Transformer Analytics. Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll go from there. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Matt. So yeah, first I want to thank everybody for joining today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day and hopping on this webinar. For those of you that I saw at TUC, it's great to see you on here again. But it's hard to believe I'm starting my 24th year in the industry as of June 1st. And so I want you guys, think about it, put your hat on, and let's go backwards in time a little bit. And let's think about, from an engineering and operations standpoint, the advent of SCADA when it came along and what we tried to do with our substation transformers. We had SCADA data, we had radio communications, we had all the different things going to protect our large substation assets. As the time evolution moves forward, AMI 1.0 comes along and we start collecting load data to start balancing out feeders, to start looking at different things. And as we move into AMI 2.0 with, those of you that are Tantalus customers on the phone, you now have a system that collects data on the interval, reports it in real time, gives you outages, gives you blink data, gives you all kinds of information at the tips, right at the tip of your fingers in a push type fashion. And so we've taken that substation level and taken it down to the distribution transformer level. So now that we can monitor these assets essentially in real time, just trailing a couple of hours to give the cloud time to crunch the numbers and represent the data to our utilities. So again, I appreciate you all taking the time, and we'll dive into it. I'm only going to spend a few minutes. Again, I spent 17 years at an electric utility, my last 5 as an engineering supervisor. So I lived what most of you are living and breathing right now on this call every day for 17 years. And as we get into the Transformer Analytics, the idea behind what we do at Tantalus and what our user community has helped us do is green is good, red needs attention, yellow, orange is marginal. Try to understand your system at a quick glance, very cursory glance very quickly. And if you look at the overview screen from our Tantalus Transformer Analytics, if you look to the lower left, you quickly get a feel. Red transformers are critically overloaded. Orange transformers are overloaded. And then your blue is a normal. So a quick look in the morning time or throughout the day, you get a quick feel for what your assets are seeing in the field when it comes to a loading perspective. As we look at the KPIs across the screen, this is a view from last month to the current month. And what this is telling you is that, hey, I have 2 transformers that have increased and gone into a critically overloaded category, and they probably need immediate attention. As we move from left to right, we had 6 move themselves out of the overloaded category into a normal category. So that's good for those transformers. And then this customer just recently loaded everything in again, and they see that there was an increase. They have 86 locations where there's either solar, battery, some type of generation behind the transformer that they can now see at the transformer level. And then what we do is we take all your Tantalus events and Tantalus alarms, and we tie that to the specific transformers to show you that, hey, there was a reduction in 34 events across your transformer asset inventory from last month to this month. So you've improved your overall system health by monitoring your system on a daily basis. One of the things, again, those of you that have customer information systems, as we continue to collect data back previously, we would have the opportunity to maybe run 12 readings with some applied mathematics in the background to see if a transformer was overloaded or critically loaded to do a load study. And those were one of the things that we had available to us with the limited data. But now, having all of this information with your meter tied to every single distribution transformer, now we can show you how many hours that transformer is in an overload condition, whether it be summer overload or a winter overload. And again, this harkens back to the green is good, yellow, orange is marginal, and red needs your attention. So you can quickly see that the ones in red in a winter overload period, we might want to take a look at those to make sure that if it's a winter heating condition, that those can, withstand through the January, February period at that utility. Again, if it's green, it's not a problem. You can look at it at your leisure, but this just gives you a quick feel from an analytics perspective on how many of your transformers are in a critically overloaded state, and then where are they on the system? Are you aware of it? Is it something that is taking place and you're waiting on a new transformer to come in, and maybe you need to go out and do some switching and monitor this on a day-by-day basis based on the load in that area while you're working through the pertinent details of getting those assets in? By looking at your whole transformer inventory and tying that to all of your meters, what we do is we run that at Tantalus into the cloud through some machine learning and some advanced analytics, and we can represent that and return that to you in a format that's very easy to digest very quickly and say, okay, how many transformers on your system are in an idle capacity? Those of us in the co-op world, when I was in the co-op world, we would leave services out there for an extended period of time as a retired service before we would actually send line crews out to begin the retirement and to pull back the transformer and bring it back into inventory in hopes that someone else would come along and move into that location and we could re-energize or keep that transformer energized. But now, with the things you guys are seeing with supply chain disruptions across the industry, now you can have a feel for what transformers are sitting out there in an idle state that you may want to go get, move, do different things with that. For the last couple of decades, we really didn't do at a co-op municipality level when it came to transformer management. In the same breath, if we look in the lower left, we can now see the underloaded transformers on our system. While there may be a lot of underloaded, that may not be a bad thing if you're in an area maybe where there's a lot of solar penetration or EV penetration. That lets you know that, hey, I may have plenty of capacity and I may not need to worry too much in certain areas based on my transformer sizing, whether or not I need to be concerned about that. But again, you have this at your fingertips every day, every so many hours to look at that this is regenerated so that you can see the health of your entire system all the way down to the distribution transformer level. Again, one of the other nice things about it is you can constantly see the allocation of your transformers across your system. Whereas before, only a few people within the utility may have had that knowledge of how many, 25 kVA tubs were out there on your system. Now you have this information that is readily available, easily graphed. And then, unfortunately, I don't have it here on the graph, but if I were to click over this and run my mouse over, it would tell me what my actual loading was over my entire base of my 25 kVA transformers on average. So it gives you a feel for how you're sizing things moving forward and how things are taking place on the grid. As we continue to drill down and capture all this information, what we've done at Tantalus is we have taken all this transformer data, and I'm using 9Star in Indianapolis just as an example, but you can see this is a 15 kVA transformer. And you can see every hour of every day, starting in December of 21, how this transformer behaves all the way across until you get to December of 22, and then you start to see a load increase. And you really start to see in January of 2023 that you're really starting to max out that 15 kVA and headed toward a 25 kVA loading on that transformer. For those engineers that are on the phone, you can get away with some of that in the wintertime. You can go to a certain point before you damage a transformer, but now you can see this every day, every hour on what's taking place on that transformer, and seeing the peak timestamp, the load history, when things occurred, what the temperature was outside, and what took place with a visual map of what that location is in the lower right corner. So we also took all your information coming out of the TC module for your Tantalus meter, and we said, okay, let's tie all of that back to the transformer so that you can see what's taking place. And as you can see on this transformer, it's seen 123 swells at that location. So if you set your sag and swell parameters correct for each of your meters based on IEEE specs, you can now start to grade out what's taking place at the location of that transformer every so many seconds based on your sag and swell qualifications on this 15 kVA transformer that's on C phase. It only has one service. You can see when we updated this, the load for transformer analytics last, and then you can see when events took place for this transformer, starting with 14 months, which is what we store in our Tantalus system. But for this package, we're going to go out to 3 years to start with. And then as we get toward the end of the 3 years, we're going to start offering optional data storage for customers to continue that on out to 4, 5, 6, however many years they wish to go as we get close to the end of our 3-year capture period.
Hey, Andrew, there's a question that came in.
Yeah.
That is, I assume this means the mapping must have the transformer to connected meters done to get the transformer loads. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have a cookbook recipe that we will work with all the utilities on having the downstream meters tied to the transformers and the services at the service location. So that is one thing that does need to be done, is that we have to know, it doesn't have to be completely mapped out perfectly. If you have it in a billing system or things of that nature, we simply need it in a couple of different formats. But if you have it mapped, that's wonderful. That makes it easier. If you have it in a billing system, we can certainly ingest that as well in a CSV type file, and where we can build that, help you build that in this application.
Thanks.
Yep. So again, all we're trying to do is take all this information from your Tantalus metering system. And if we have non-Tantalus customers on here, the same principle applies. We would take your AMI metering data and we run it through our engine. And in this scenario, the transformer, as you can see, these are shaded out in red, but all of these transformers from a certain substation, Lee Hanna 3, had some type of incident take place. And I selected one transformer out of it, and it's seen 41 swells, 6 outages. It's a 50 kVA transformer. It's a pad mount in a neighborhood. And so now we can see the different, meters or the homes that are connected to those transformers that we can work through and start to understand what's taking place at each one of those residences, whether we need to get that information from our TUNet Insight or whether we need to work backwards to the transformer page that I just showed you one above to look in here and see what's taking place at said transformer. So it just lets you drill down and see what's going on at a very granular level, like we used to do with SCADA at a substation transformer. Now we can start to do this at distribution transformers all across your entire footprint. And again, at Tantalus, what we try to do is we have a cookbook recipe that we put together, and our project managers walk you through the setup and what we need to make you successful and for us to be successful. And ultimately, this package, the goal is not only to clean up your system for yourself at the utility, but if you have an OMS system or if you have a billing system, we want to integrate so that all of the data is clean all the way through, so that if you do have an OMS and you do have an outage on several meters and it flags a transformer, we want that outage prediction to be correct to take you to the first failed point without you guys having an error. And so we help you with everything that we can when it comes to auditing your assets, your transformers, your meters, and how they're connected and the information you've provided us, so that we can help you clean up other systems and make this tool as valuable as possible. So with that being said, that's the very high level overview of this software. And I want to turn it over to Sarah and Adam from Estes Park. They've been very gracious and offered to report back a little bit on how they've used the package. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to them and let you guys hear from one of your own peers.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. Can you hear me okay? I never know if this mic's picking up or not.
You're good.
Okay. All right. So one of the first applications that we or that I was looking at for using the transformer analytics for in Estes was to get greater visibility into the impact and the impact of increased solar on our system. We have about 12,000 customers total across our system, and only currently about 200 solar systems. But since Estes and our power wholesaler has a 2030 goal of transitioning to completely non-carbon energy resources, we are anticipating a significant increase in the number of solar systems, residential solar and commercial solar systems on our system. And the transformer analytics look to be a really great way of getting kind of a baseline before we started seeing an anticipated high uptick in the installation of those solar systems. So I've incorporated looking at the transformer loading into our solar review application review process, pulling up the location, looking at the current transformer loads, looking to see if there are any current solar systems off that same transformer. A lot of people, they kind of, you'll get the first person on the street will get a solar system, and then within a year or two, you see the next person, you see neighbors starting to get solar systems as well. So getting a handle on that, or an idea of what our baseline conditions are kind of before that starts happening, was really appealing. And with the analytics, I'm sorry, I didn't pull up a picture of it, but once you pull up the details page, there's a simulation function or feature that you can put in the anticipated solar loading and see how that shift is going to potentially line up. So a transformer that might have been kind of borderline loaded or overloaded before, depending on where you are and what the services, the number of services are. You might get a little more lifespan out of that transformer because of the introduction of solar. But you want to make sure, and this gives you a way to watch. Okay, well, at what point is that going to be too much? But with the analytics, you now have that visibility without waiting for wires to melt. Next slide, please. Couple of the other things that came out or became much more visible once we had the analytics up and running was another level of system data validation. More from a data management perspective, especially on system data. We look at our GIS data, and running through your day-to-day operations, your handful or a couple hundred out of several thousands of, or a couple dozens out of several thousands of transformers, where you have duplicate IDs in your day-to-day operation that may not necessarily be an issue. The number of times that you're, if you're dispatching a crew or to go and service a transformer, respond to an issue at a customer location, having a transformer number, the same transformer number or transformers with the same numbers in two different locations isn't necessarily going to be a problem. You know, you've got two separate addresses, you go and you're troubleshooting at a location. But when you're pulling the data back and looking at it in aggregate, having those duplicate IDs kind of becomes a problem. And within the analytics, this example here, it's the same transformer number. One is a single phase overhead transformer in one area of the system, and the other is a three-phase pad mount transformer in an entirely different spot. Now the system or the analytics is going to aggregate all of that because it's tying everything back to that transformer ID. This has given us an extra incentive because this the analytics has been valuable. This is giving us an extra incentive to put a mapping project together to go and sort through our list of duplicate numbers or duplicated IDs to really tease that out and make sure that we're getting good data to rely on. Next slide. Another kind of missing data element was transformer ratings that would impact day-to-day operations a little bit more. Running off of off of GIS data during for dispatching crews or troubleshooting problems out in the field. You pull up the system GIS, doesn't have a KVA rating for whatever reason. It would be a little bit of an issue, but again, here with the analytics, with everything being aggregated, it's something that we realized is a more important thing than we had previously needed. So again, it's something that we are now taking, using as an opportunity, as an extra impetus to go out and collect that data and update our GIS system and our GIS data so that we can in turn update our analytics data. In this case, it's one that we had. We do have one batch of data, and then the next batch of data was missing that KVA rating. Functionally, from the analytics perspective, it will still run the analytics. You just don't quite know necessarily where your threshold is. So it'll still run, you'll still get your loading history. You just don't know on a relative scale, like where that upper threshold is for this particular transformer. And with that, so that's been my experience with it, or my uses of it. From more the office analytics perspective. I'll turn it over to Adam. He's our service crew supervisor, and he'll give he's got a much more field-based perspective.
Yeah, so I'm Adam with Estes Park, line crew supervisor, and day-to-day operations. People call and say, hey, I want to upgrade my service to 200 amps. In the past, I don't know what everyone else is doing, but it's always been kind of this magical rule of thumb of, how many KVA per 200 amp service, or some places use 5 KVA, some do 2, some do 3, and you never really knew. I never really knew. Maybe someone else does, but so with this, now I could go in and a service line off this transformer wants to upgrade, I can actually dive into that transformer and see if it does need to be upgraded, if it can handle that higher service load, and what the loads look like on that transformer. Because I think we've noticed a trend that loads can vary, in neighborhoods, and how things impact that transformer. So that's kind of where, Sarah kind of let me know, hey, we're getting this thing, and I was like, oh, sounds cool. And now I kind of been diving into it every day and finding more uses for it. And seeing what's actually happening in these transformers is pretty cool. So you can go to the next slide.
Hey, Adam, while we're doing that, we
Yeah.
did have a question that came in that asked both what is your title? You know, what is your role in the company? My apologies for not giving that up front. And then how much time are you actually using Transformer Analytics in a day? How many hours, for example, are you spending with it?
Yeah, so I'm line crew supervisor and running our service crew and trouble crew. I would say I'm on it daily now. And with your guys' inputs, like, hey, just make it a habit to check on it in the morning and see what everything's looking like. And now I'm finding myself like doing that, but also when a customer calls, like, oh, I can actually look that up now. So I'm spending more and more time. The more I use it, the more time I'm spending on it and diving into things. So yeah, I would say maybe an hour a day on average. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, Adam.
And yeah, the cool part about it is also learning how our loads work. So like this screen here, you can click on cold months because that's when we have been seeing our loads the highest. So I can kind of funnel out all the stuff I don't really care about and see when the transformer is loaded the most, because that's what I'm going to size it off of, is the peak load on that. So yeah, you can see December of 22 was kind of our coldest month and had the highest loading, but pretty much every other time of the year, there's room to add load onto this transformer. And also with this, we can start to see how loads affect the transformer. We've always been told, you know, a loaded transformer is way better than an underloaded transformer. Now we can actually see how those perform over time. And like Sarah was saying, we got a good baseline now. We can see where the loads are at on those transformers and start to see a trend of what's failing and what's not. So next slide. And then on this one, this was one of our overloaded transformers, kind of blurry, but you get the idea. So we pulled this up and you can see it's pretty overloaded and those cold months again. And there's, I think, 18 services off this transformer, which seems like a lot. So now we can dive in and see, do we add a transformer or do we upsize the transformer? Maybe adding a smaller transformer a couple spans away and splitting that load up is kind of the way to go in this scenario. So that's how I've been using it. I did find another instance actually on Saturday. I got a call that a transformer had failed in the middle of the night. So went out, sure enough, the transformer had failed and went back to the shop here and like, oh, I'll pull up the analytics and see what it's been doing. And it was a 37.5 overhead transformer feeding one 400 amp service, and it had no load on it. So it's like, well, normally we would have just thrown another 37.5 up there. Maybe we can throw a 10 up there and, you know, save those 37.5. So we can really dive into that and see what makes the most sense. And with this loading, you know, for the past 2 years, we see what's actually happening on this. So that was just an instance that happened this weekend. And like, it's a tool I never would have thought about. And now it's like, oh, it's right here at my fingertips. And it takes 10 seconds and I can see what's actually happening on there. So that's how I've been using it. And I think that was my last slide. Oh, I did have another one. Same area where that, and I was just going to go in again, like the cold months is really what dials it in. And you can see this 25 kVA is getting over that 50 kVA loading. So we added this to our list. We're going to go add a transformer and split up these services. And then I'm excited to see what that does to the load and how that works. Yeah, I think that's all I got. Is there any questions on that?
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate that.
Not at this point, Adam. We'll collect questions in chat. So, as we go through this, if any come in, I'll bring them up. Rachel, are you there?
I'm ready. Hey
All
guys
All right.
and gals, everybody on the call, appreciate you. I also just want to, kind of give a shout out to Tantalus too. It's been great to, work with them as we've been, beta testing this tool. They've been awesome about giving, we give feedback. They're great about integrating that. And so it's been a really awesome, collaborate environment basically for doing this. And, basically we've got 2 working groups that have been really utilizing this tool. Our staking engineering team, they're kind of do a lot what Adam does and sort of the portion of just designing new services and existing services and seeing, how you can add new services to existing transformers, things like that. And then really kind of our engineering technician who's looking into system maintenance. Those are really the 2 that have been utilizing it the most. And I guess just to step back for a minute. So my title is engineering energy resource manager at La Plata Electric. So I basically oversee both system administration of our AMI network and then the meter shop. So I kind of get to see all the different pieces of how the AMI works. And then now, tying it into a lot of how the transformer loading is going has been really, really interesting. And so, in the future, trying to dive more into that and using it probably more every day rather than for just system checks now and again. Our staking team utilizes this tool daily. They're in there all the time. And just to kind of give you a comparison, I know there's a lot of text, so sorry about that. But the old method we used to do, we have an MDM system. And so we used to go in meter by meter, using our GIS software to figure out all the meters that are off a transformer, input them into the MDM, build a virtual meter. Then you have to wait for it to compile all this data. And sometimes it could take, a long time. 20 minutes is probably pretty generous. Sometimes it can take a lot longer depending on all the other processes that are running. And then it pops out this maybe 1 year's worth of data if you're willing to wait that long for it all to aggregate. And then you have just basically a rough guess, I think this is going to be the max of what's on the transformer. And then you're adding on, I've got a new service. How is that going to look? And it's more of kind of this guessing game. And like Adam said too, there's kind of a rule of thumb that gets played into that too. But what's awesome about the tool, Andrew, you can go to the next one there, is that it maybe takes 5 minutes now. They can pull up the screen. You can easily see, what the loading looks like. For what Adam was showing too, you can look at the cold months because we're also in the mountains in Colorado, we're a winter peaking utility. So that's really, what we're kind of afraid of, but it's nice to have the whole year too. We're getting a lot more air conditioning load coming on. So now our summer months are getting more, packed. We're getting a lot more EVs and stuff like that in our area. So it's good to have that look through the whole year. And one of the great parts about it is you can add or very easily look at 3 years of data. And, we've all been kind of living in that weird, coming out of the COVID thing. So people's usage really kind of shifted during COVID. So getting that 3-year look back where you're seeing, in the middle of COVID, we looked like this, kind of post-COVID and coming out of it. So it's nice to have at least 3 years of data so you can see how people, their trends have been. And so you can kind of make that decision. Do we really need to upgrade our transformer? Do we need to put a new transformer in? All these different things when you're trying to size a load. Also I put in here, you can add a dummy load, which is a great feature too. So you could say, all right, I'm thinking this new customer is going to add 10 kVA of load. You can put that in and it will actually put it on top of, and I'm sorry, I should have a fixed picture of this, but you can put it and it'll map in with the current loading on the transformer so that you can see, even with this 10 kVA load, is that going to max out the transformer and for how often? So that makes it really, really easy to see with the current usage profile, how maybe this new load will act. The other thing, down here in Durango, we have a ton of solar generation, several thousand behind the meter installations and more going in every day. So that for us is really big too, to see, which transformers have generation on them and how that generation is affecting the transformer. You can go to the next slide.
So Rachel, there are a couple questions that came in just
Sure.
to ask real quickly. One is, I think I heard you say utilities can set cold versus hot months so you can see what's going on.
Yeah, so you can, what Adam was saying, there's a button when you're looking at the profiles, you can select under season. So actually you can see up here in this one that says, under loading distribution, in the background there that says season, and then says this month, and you can actually drop down and you can select cold months, and I think you can select hot months as well, or maybe it's just the middle.
Yeah, you can. We've set it up so that you can actually go behind the scenes based on your area and break the year apart. If you happen to be a Southern Georgia customer and you don't have some of the shoulder months, you could have 6 hot months versus, 4 cold months and 2 shoulder months. So we've broken it out so that you can, it's very configurable.
Yeah, there. Thank you for that.
The other thing, Rachel, you mentioned solar, and there was a question that came in that says, how does it show you who has solar? So
we pretty much, we don't have any wind generation or anything like that. We've got some batteries on the system. So we just kind of assume, any transformer that is, it'll alert you, I guess, if it's ever seeing any kind of backfeeding, basically. And I think, so I can skip, I will get to that in just a minute. I've got another slide coming up that you can actually show the generation on the graph, and it will alert it on the main screen. There, like when you log into Transformer Analytics, there is actually a button where you can just select transformers showing generation, which is great because it'll alert you to all those sites that you have, and you can see which ones, have so much solar penetration that they're actually, backfeeding through the transformer. So that's a really cool way of just getting an overview and seeing how many locations you have with that. And like I said, I'll show you in the follow-up slide kind of some of our the graphs and what they look like for when that's we're having over generation, and kind of how we've been utilizing that. So for this is, again, going back to the staking team, I just kind of put a quote from one of my stakers on there. It's so, they love how easy it is. Like when we were ending kind of our trial period, I think I had about 6 of our stakers come and be like, please don't get rid of the tool. It saves me so much time. I use it every day. It's so easy. They love the different features on it, being able to see the loading, if you're just looking at a month, an hour, or like several different things like that, looking at the voltage on that transformer and the peak load history, and being able to see the map at the bottom, that pop out to show where's that transformer located. And you can see, how many other houses around it. And like Adam was saying, if you could maybe split up some of the services, on 2 different transformers, stuff like that, it just gives a really nice, easy scan for how to check that out. You can go to the next one. And here's what I was talking about with the generation. You can see on this graph at the top here. So it's neat the way it does it. It shows all the loading, for what's, your delivered energy, but then it also has that peak, usage or the generation on the bottom there too. So kind of being able to determine, hey, are we actually running this transformer all the way? Are we overdriving this transformer in reverse too, which is kind of interesting. And that's been opening up some questions for, some of our maintenance team and things like that too. Like we're getting some that are, have so much solar penetration on that. It's, like, how is this going to function and continue to function in the future? So it's a nice, really good look at for those on there. You can go to the next slide. And that will tie into kind of more of our system maintenance. So that's one of the things we look at too, is, like Andrew had mentioned too, it's a really good tool for seeing which transformer overloaded, and need to be really dove into to see, like, do we need to upgrade it? Do we need to even just keep an eye on it? Like, in the future, could be a problem. And so putting that on our awareness is really nice too. And it also shows which transformers are underloaded. So could we downsize there? And like Adam gave that great example with that transformer that just failed, like, hey, do we really need to put a 37.5 transformer there? Can we use something smaller, like a 10 kVA? There's only one service on them, they're never maxing out. So that kind of gives us that ability too. Or if we really were in a bad way and couldn't get a transformer and had a large one that was underutilized, we can determine if it's worth the cost to go out and pull that transformer and put a smaller one in. So that's been really great. It's also given us a great place to jump off and start cleaning up our mapping system too. You can go to the next slide. To dive more into that. So we have lots of, or not lots actually, our mapping is actually pretty good, but there are locations where we've had, hey, this is labeled as a 1.5 kVA transformer, but it feeds 3 houses and there's no way that it can pull 12 kVA. And it's been out there for, 15 to 30 years. It's like either it's an amazing or it's disabled. So that's been a really good tool for us too, just kind of doing system cleanup to go through and pick that kind of low hanging fruit. Now we've got an exact place to go and just verify those. And it's a good, place if you've got interns or something like that to help clean up your system. Again, it shows areas that because we've got such a big solar generation, we actually have to upgrade. We've had to upgrade transformers in the past because somebody wants to put in such a big solar array that it's going to max out that transformer. So that also really helps us when we're doing system analyzing our system to see when do we also need to upgrade a transformer because of a solar system. You can go to the next slide. So this is kind of a deeper dive into that one. So, looking at this transformer, like, hey, it's a 10 kVA transformer, but we're pushing down into, almost 15 kVA in the reverse on that transformer like this. And then that's something we've kind of been talking to Tanos about too, is like, hey, we maybe want the max line, and you can see in the positive there at 10 kVA, but also having something in reverse too to show no matter what, if it's going 10 kVA in the positive or 10 kVA in the bottom, that is what your transformer is rated for. So, in this example, our system technician was like, hey, I don't know why we approved a 20 kW system for a 10 kVA transformer. And so it's nice to be able to have that ability to see, these are areas, and tell a member and actually be able to show them too. If they're complaining about having to replace the transformer for putting solar, it's like, well, based on what's already there, we're already getting close to maxing out, adding this based on, the amount of load you're hoping to put in. You're going to backfeed that transformer even more. So it's kind of an interesting nuanced tool that we're finding has been really useful as well. And I think, let's see. Yeah. And then this one is another one that was an interesting find on that. I mean, the transformer is overloaded, but it's being overloaded due to solar too. Overloaded due to, people's usage, not because of the solar. So it's interesting too, though, but it's still alarming and showing as a generating transformer on our system, because there are points when it's actually generating more than people are consuming. So it's interesting, but to have all of those, the data. So I think that you can go to.
Yep. So
For me,
that brings it back to Tantalus, and I'm going to turn it over to Matt. But before I turn it over to Matt, I want to thank Rachel and Adam and Sarah for participating and showing us how two different utilities are using this tool. But for everyone on the call, a couple of questions were brought to Adam's attention on how long are you in the system and how much time. The system can be set up to automatically set alarm constraints. So we can set subscription alarms once you determine what you're looking for to trigger you when to go in and look. So if you're looking for alarms at, say, the overview level page based on transformers that are generating, if that number changes, you can get an alarm. If you see so many that are violating, that are in critically overloaded, you can get an alarm sent to the line superintendent. Or if seeing too many event alarms, you can have it sent to the engineering staff to see if there's something going on at the substation. So it's very configurable from that aspect. And then one other thing is that we know all of you guys are all over the country, North America, whatnot, and have different temperature constraints and different engineers that lay out the system. And it's very, very easy to change this, to change your setup from, we all live by the IEEE standards, but some of us massage a little bit one way and some massage a little bit another way based on where we're at in the country and based on weather and based on summer peak or winter peak. And you can configure that very, very quickly. And you can do the same with underloaded and overloaded hours for your comfort factor. So I just wanted to point those two things out before I turn it back over to Matt, and then we'll take any and all questions. So it's all you, Matt.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks. And we do have some questions coming in, so folks just know, address those in just a moment. I did want to take just a minute, and kind of summarize what we've heard today. And Rachel, Adam, Sarah, thanks very much for your input and perspective on this. Really do appreciate what you guys have done with us. And there's some additional questions that have come in around that I'm going to ask in just a moment. But I wanted to sum it up from the Tantalus perspective by just making sure that we got across our message as to what's happening. And like Andrew said, what we're trying to do here. As I mentioned earlier, we're seeing a real need in the market for a solution like this. There's a tremendous amount of pressure out there. I think I mentioned some of these earlier in the presentation around increasing need for electricity, extreme weather, and increased adoption of EVs and DERs, placing pressure on what you're being asked to do and what's happening on the grid for you. There are extreme supply chain disruptions. Again, as I mentioned, we're hearing 12 to 18 months lead time for some transformers. So really the ability to plan to both mitigate, address, and plan issues is increasingly important. And then, of course, from a safety and labor perspective, we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to help you in the current environment. So Transformer Analytics, from what we planned for and what we're seeing and hearing from customers like La Plata and Estes Park that are trialing this, is really we're working to reduce expenses around the components themselves, damaged or broken units. We want to make sure that you're able to understand, mitigate, and address those before anything happens. We'd like to prevent outages, or with you, help to prevent outages that can affect the utility, but also the community itself, whether that's in terms of, the social aspect of people's quality of life or the cost side of this. Planning ahead for sags or swells in demand based upon the information that you're getting from the system as the team here went through. And then, best decision on how and where to position transformers to ensure that you're continuing to deliver the quality service that you all have, your customers and members have become accustomed to. So that's really where we came out on putting this together. Andrew's been involved from the start. I'm going to have some questions for the team here. Some of these, I apologize, I should have asked or mentioned as we got started. For Rachel and Sarah and Adam, maybe just quickly, how long have you guys been using the system?
So using Tantalus, just in general, I guess we've been with them for probably about a decade now, using that, and it's been great. I mean, probably the Transformer Analytics, I think it's been about a year-ish, I think is what we jumped in and started doing it, maybe less. I can't exactly recall.
Yeah, on our side, we started our Tantalus deployment in, I think 2015 was the early days of our deployment, and really ramped it up in 2018, 2019. And then we were, I think we've been using the analytics for maybe about 9 months. I think we were a little bit later into the trial period, or the demo than La Plata.
Gotcha. So somewhere 9 to 12 months for both of you all on working with Transformer Analytics. That's great. A couple other questions that have come in. Can analytics identify behind the meter EV and distributed generation without separately metering either of those?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
so-
go ahead.
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Rachel. No, go ahead.
No,
You
you're
take it from a
probably-
customer perspective.
You probably know better, Andrew. I mean, just for us, we do install pure production meters behind our, behind all of our net meters, but those are not currently tied to any transformers. So the data you saw from us showing the generation load, that's all through net meters. So it is identifying, when we've got solar penetration, and then we do have quite a few house battery systems too. So there are ones, we've kind of identified, in the evenings when we're seeing, generation on meters and stuff like that, we've identified either those being batteries behind the scenes. EVs, we can kind of look at, we're looking more into that, places we know that there's EVs, looking for those big block, charging periods and stuff like that, but that's not something we've really dove into. But yes, all those are from our actual normal net meters.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is the data viewed in real time, or does it have to be uploaded through an Exchange file?
It's uploaded. It runs on a connection from your TUNet server out to our analytics cloud, and then we run machine learning and AI against it and then represent it. So it's trailing just a little bit. Right now, all of our customers, we have them set for 6-hour PQM, and that's when we bring it all out and back.
Thank you. Rachel, you mentioned this, but any other color around the transition for staff in terms of using the analytics? I think you mentioned that you had some great responses from your team. Any additional commentary on that, the transition to using the solution?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, pretty intuitive. There's a lot of stuff in there, and I have to say, I don't use it as much as a lot of my other team does. So there's, some learning. It's just with everything, that's like a very powerful tool, and there's lots of information in there. It didn't take a ton of time, I think, for them, the way they utilize it, and they kind of focused in on that. There's some great webinars and trainings that Tantalus has too, that you can get, to train people. I've rewatched some of those too, and that's been really helpful. Also, the Tantalus team is great about reaching out to them if you've got questions. And Andrew, Matt, not to give you a slew of questions, but it is nice being able to reach out to somebody and say, hey, how can I do this? And I've always found Tantalus to be extremely responsive when you're trying to figure something out or do some training. Maybe your account manager could even set up some specific training with that, but it is good. I mean, it doesn't take a ton of time. If you're used to using TUNet and stuff like that, it is different, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's a huge transition to get to do that, especially if you do kind of some preliminary webinars or something like that to get familiar with the tool.
Sarah, Adam, any additional comments on the transition to using the solution?
Yeah, I just found it really easy to use. Like once you start fiddling around with it, it's pretty intuitive, like Rachel was saying. But I'm sure there's way more it can do than what I've been using it for. But just as a daily tool,
Yeah, that's great, guys. Thanks. And again, to reiterate what the team just said, if as you do deploy the solution, we of course look forward to working with you to ensure that that's as smooth a transition as possible. I do think there's a lot of benefits from efficiencies on the workload and labor side of things to be accrued or handled there. We want to help you with that. Another question came up. In addition to the data issues discussed, has either of you encountered incorrect meter to transformer mapping? And if yes, how did you resolve it?
Yeah,
So-
I mean, we found some of that, where they were labeled, mostly it was like different voltages that didn't make sense. And it kind of presented weird when we looked at the transformer loading, because we had some that were actually, 120 volts that you're like, well, it can't be off this transformer. So looking at that, there was some ways to do that. And what we did is we're able to go out, look at that actual meter, and CES is definitely not connected to this one, and then just get into our mapping and update it. And then once we had that updated mapping, it was easy to just pull a new file into the Transformer Analytics. And then that was able to kind of resolve that issue to, and there are other ones. I mean, yeah, I think sometimes if we had an overloaded transformer that seemed like, oh, we've got 3 services off this one, and going out in the field verifying that, hey, this transformer is 10 kVA, it's not something bigger, there's no way all 3 of these could be on that, then that's kind of helped us track it down too. But we don't really do, I think if we had maybe 15 5-minute interval data coming from the meters, we could probably look at the profiles from that to see if what all of them are seeing in terms of voltage and stuff like that. Then it would be really easy to tell which ones are off which transformer, but we just mostly do our interval data, so it's not really granular enough to have something like that right off the cuff, I guess.
Sarah, did you have any additional comments around that?
Oh, I was kind of to re-echo what Rachel was saying. There is an audit function or an audit page within the Transformer Analytics that will kind of highlight was on your initial setup, you'll have service, you'll set up your service locations with the feeder circuits and feeders that they're on. And kind of in parallel, you'll set up your transformers with the circuits and feeders they're on, and the analytics kind of ties them all together. And the audit will flag like, hey, you said this service that's tied to this transformer is over here, but the other chunk of data that you sent in says that it's on this feeder over on the other side of the system. So it'll flag those incongruencies or those discrepancies in a few different ways. And then it is iterative. Like in the end, you do have to go out, put eyes on, boots on the ground, eyes on the location and the transformer, and say, okay, well, what is it really? Like, where is it actually? And then you come back and you update your data and feed it back through.
Sometimes humans still have to be involved, huh?
Yeah.
Well, listen, I appreciate this greatly. For the folks still on the line, thank you for hanging in there with us. We've had a lot of good questions. We've got some that I will answer and get to you offline. We haven't been able to get to all of them on the call. I do want to make sure that the folks here understand and know Tantalus really does believe strongly in the solution that we're bringing to market. And I think, as you can hear from Rachel, Adam, and Sarah, that this is working well for them. With that in mind, we do want to work with you. If you have interest in looking at or deploying our Transformer Analytics solution, please contact Andrew or me. We've got a specific offer that we'll make to you all based upon your needs, and we'll customize the offer to you. But just call us, let us know that you do have this interest, and we're going to put together something that will work for you all and us in terms of deploying the solution. This has been recorded, so I will share the recording with everyone here today. You'll have a link to it and can download it. I will also share the PowerPoint or PDF slides that we went through today. If you do have any other questions, you are free to email those to Andrew and me, and we'll handle those for you. Like I said, we weren't able to get to a couple that came through on the chat or the Q&A, and I will address those offline and get answers back to you all. I want to again thank Andrew, but Andrew, of course, you're always thanked, but especially to our facilities team here, Rachel, Sarah, and Adam. Thank you for your input and your perspective. It is well worth it to hear from someone who's actually using the solution versus just talking about it. So thanks for that. Thank you all for attending today. Look forward to hearing from those interested in both our solution and moving forward with it, or any additional questions. And I will be sending out this information. So thank you all very much. Have a great day, and enjoy your upcoming weekend. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys. I got to hop to another call, but thank you so much for participating, and I appreciate your help.
Yeah.
Anytime.
thank you.
See you guys.
Take care, guys.
Good one.
I'm going to hang on just for a second to make sure we clear out what we need. Thanks, Rachel.